All right. I'm sitting here with Alex Burnley. Am I saying your last name right?
That's it,
I lived
Burnley.
with you. We were roommates, and I still don't know how to pronounce your last name. Burnley.
You
Okay, got
nailed
it.
it.
So you're a surfing instructor and deep water open swimming instructor and fitness instructor and this other thing that I always forget, competitive surf rescue lifeguard
That's it. Hmm.
in Tel Aviv, Israel. Right now, we're in Pardes Khana in my new recording studio, and you are my first podcast guest. So, welcome.
Oh, that's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming all the way up from Tel Aviv. I know it was tough to get out of that city because it kind of just pulls you in.
Yeah.
So, tell us about what you're doing with all these things in Tel Aviv. What's your day to day there? What do you like the best out of all these things that you're involved with the ocean?
Mm. So my day to day starts with around six o'clock in the morning. I have my first clients, and the morning can be broken up into different sessions: 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, till about 11. Can be swimming, can be self defense, can be surfing, and it can be surf rescue, which is swimming and surf paddling in order to save lives. That has also a competitive element, so it requires a lot of high level of fitness.
So you're basically just by the water all day, every day, doing one of these things or another.
As much as I can be. And then in the summer, there's usually a second session in the evening from like 3 to 8 in the summer. And in the winter, it's a bit when sunset goes at around 5 o'clock. So there'll be maybe an hour or two in the water and then an hour or two on land.
How does it feel to be on land outside the water right now?
Here now, it's so far from the sea. Like I'm getting anxiety. I might have to jump into this cup in a minute
You
and
are
swim.
a human amphibian.
Yes.
Your natural habitat is in the ocean.
Yeah. Something I discovered, something that wasn't clear to me for a long time. Everything else just felt slightly off. And then when I discovered that, I thought, here I must invest more time, more energy into discovering, scratch the surface and discover what's going on behind that.
So when we were living together in Tel Aviv, you would bring your surfboard every day to the ocean. No one was paying you at that point. You were
Hmm.
in a path of self-discovery. You were just doing what you wanted to do, like you said.
Hmm.
What was that process like of just following something that you weren't sure whether you were going to build a career out of or not, and just sort of it was an unknown time, really.
Hmm. But it was just around Corona time. I was swimming a lot before that. I was always loving swimming and loving swimming in the sea. I think Corona allowed me to refocus my refocus. Um, I wasn't doing it with any intention of making money from it. I was pursuing a higher calling. That's the only way I could really call it. A higher calling from higher power to pursue something that I didn't know where it would lead. Um, and during that process of that almost pure dedication, um, I discovered all the nuances within the craft and became very at home with it. They talk about the 10,000 hours, doing something for 10,000 hours. And I'm somewhere up there with the amount of hours.
Hmm.
Um,
And you were mostly, when you say 10,000 hours, that was mostly swimming. This was before you started surfing and putting in all those hours into surfing. So how did you get into surfing from there?
mm. So it started off. I used to swim a 5 kilometer sea swim. It's called the Port to Port. It goes from Jaffa Port to Mitzitzim, which is just past the marina. And that was quite a annual thing for me and a few of my friends. We used to do that quite often. And around 2019, I decided I wanted to double down on this passion and see where it would take me. That aligned with what was going on with the Corona and Seger and being close to the sea. And I decided I wanted to do a 10 kilometer swim, which is not easy. It's about 3 hours of swimming. I managed to do it in my best time was 2 hours and 15 minutes. And considering that Olympians are doing it in like 1 hour 90, 1 hour, just under 2 hours, it was pretty good. To get them in everyday training, sometimes twice a day, training under all different conditions. I used to like to swim at the crack of dawn before the sun came too high, because as you're swimming, you have to turn your head to breathe. And I found that the sun came over the buildings about half an hour after sunrise. So if I could get in 20 minutes before, I could get maybe half the swim in before the sun was really an issue, but it wasn't pitch black like night. There was a couple of times I went in when the stars were still up. I do not recommend that for anybody, and definitely not for a beginner. But that's how I did it.
And that's how you got into surfing.
So I was swimming at that time, but I was swimming in all conditions, in high waves. And I remember a couple of times swimming past Hilton Bay, where the surfers are, and they would just kind of like look at me like, like, what's this guy doing? Like swimming, in these waves. And something that I picked up when I started surfing was that my wave recognition, which is one of the four major elements of surfing, was really, really apt, because I was timing waves in order to take breaths, which is like milliseconds of decision making. And surfers are usually looking 2 meters behind them and timing their paddling into the wave. So the wave recognition I had down. So when I first started surfing, ironically, a lot of the surfers, the intermediate surfers anyway, were looking at me and looking at my timing for the wave, like when to catch the wave. Surfing is something I always wanted to do. It's something that I never believed I would actually do. It was a dream. And I'm thankful to a lot of different people that kind of pushed me and helped me along the way. But for me, it was miraculous to get from where I was in London, working, either with the Jewish community or working in an office, to go from that to this, for me was a miraculous transition.
Mm-hmm. You said it was like you were divinely inspired or inspired by a greater power. So were you ever scared during this process, or the whole time you were just in it?
The whole thing is scary. The whole thing is awe-inspiring. It's terrifying. Even when the conditions are, even when you can deal with the conditions aren't intimidating. I was pushing myself to my absolute limit. So even if it was a wave that I recognized, I was trying to turn. I was learning from people around me, from all the other surfers there, like how to turn, when to do it, the timing, trying to catch a wave that was even steeper each time. And when I was swimming by myself and trying to get those distances in, I used to hit a wall, at different points. You hit a wall. It can be at 6 kilometers, 7 kilometers. 8.5 was a tough one for me. I hit a plateau there. And to get past that and to know that you're going to swim now your heart out, and then you got to give even more. So getting to that place, I had to reconstruct my whole life, what I ate, how much I slept, entertainment, dating, relationships, social life. Everything was pivoted around this one focal point of getting to that 10 kilometers or catching waves, depending on which one I was focusing on.
Do you think that you were in that sort of state of mind because you were a competitive surf rescue lifeguard, or was this before you became the competitive lifeguard?
The competitive lifeguard thing happened afterwards, and that for me was another kind of...
So the pushing yourself happened internally first before the external competitive stuff?
Yeah.
Wow.
100%, yeah. I was coming home completely rinsed. I remember, like, even after all the training, even bringing the board back was like a big struggle. And then I would eat minimally, whatever it would just get me. You remember that?
When we were roommates, you had a big thing of protein powder and you would mix it in a bowl, and that was one meal. That was 2 meals, maybe 3 meals for the day.
Yeah, that was it. And like maybe if I was really had to, half a pita bread, and that was it, and then sleep, and then straight back out there to push it to the next level.
Yeah, man. I didn't know what was driving you, and I probably still don't, but it was impressive, and you got to where you are through that process somehow. What's it like teaching? Because now you're teaching a lot of people, you're an instructor. Um, do you feel like you're still learning yourself? Tell me about that.
So I've always been a teacher in some capacity within my life, but teaching this very physical and very involved, you're surrounded by the water experience. I learn everything from each of my students. I learn something, and their kinesiology, the way they interact with the medium, the board, or the waves, or their style of swimming. It's all more information and more data and more feedback that I then integrate or use. Um, and I enjoy it when a student tickles something in my brain that I had to go through. That's really a joy for me. And then when I take them past that place, it can be something like the balance or adapting the pop up depending on the wave or recognizing what the wave is. When I manage to convey that, it's a real joy because it's something that I had to go through myself. Um,
Yeah. Are you still going through some of these things yourself, or do you feel like you're on autopilot now with the teaching and you're just in the day-to-day teaching now?
um, I'm constantly trying to improve my teaching style, and a lot of that is about recognizing the person in front of me, recognizing the student and what their strengths are. So I've had some guys who are Milwimnikim, right? So they've come straight out of the army. They're muscular, they're big, right? They're tough, and trying to convey to them a little bit of a softer approach to sport and to the water and the patience involved. Um, is something that I had to go through as well, coming from like much harder, you know, regular gym workouts or from martial arts, to go into that process of being a lot more in the flow and connecting to the water. It's something that, when conveyed properly and in the right way, it can, it transitions the whole person's consciousness from a place of fighting and against to in flow.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know, maybe something that helped you become so successful as a surfing and water instructor is because you clearly have a deep understanding from a spiritual and introspective place of how all this works. And just knowing you, that's something that you think about on a regular basis is what I'm doing. Like, it's not just a physical act, it's
Mm-hmm.
something bigger. And you bring a lot of mindfulness and conscientiousness to what you're doing out there. Is there anything you want to like elaborate on through that
For sure.
process?
For me, it was a place of meeting the creator, mainly because I had to push myself beyond what I believed I could do. And then also being out there in the sea is a beautiful thing, and you are in touch with the creation. And, you can, they say you understand the artist through the artwork. And suddenly you see it might be the types of fish that swim past you, or the birds, or the way that the light catches the water. And it's awe-inspiring. The next step for me is really becoming a better adapted teacher to the different types of clientele. How much of this stuff I want to convey to other people is I'm still figuring that out. How much of that is my process, and how much of that will be shared just through doing the thing. The surf rescue has now become, or at least for the last year and a half, was the big part of my focus. I was in a competition in Belgium in when was it? Not this last August, the August before, 2023, representing Israel. On the European stage, we had a small team of Israeli athletes out there, and that was really my focus just until before the war, just before October.
Who won?
I think it was Spain, actually.
Oh, not Israel.
Yeah, not
Okay.
Israel. We got 8th place out of 50, which is brilliant
It's pretty
for
good.
first time, and also brilliant for the fact that we didn't have all the equipment that we needed. We kind of had to just do
For
it.
those that aren't familiar with surf rescue competitions like
Mhm.
myself,
Yeah.
what's a quick synopsis of what happens in this competition?
Okay, so it's groups from all over the world, and you're on the beach. Each kind of group has like a tent, and you have different competitions. You have a regular swim, but you're against 15 other people. So you're kind of like running into the water and elbowing each other out the way, almost like a bit like a rugby scrum. And then you're trying to swim around different buoys, different
Okay.
floaties in the water. You have the same thing on boards, paddling, a simple race. And then you have more complex technique things like you'll swim out to rescue somebody and have to bring them back, or you'll paddle out, or you'll do a combination of all three, where you do a beach run, beach swim, and then a beach paddle. So it's a huge amount of endurance, strength endurance. Um, there's a pool element to it, which we didn't go into this year, which uses flippers and dummies and ropes and a lot more technical. But the rescues itself, I teach in Tel Aviv, and I was teaching the madrichim, the other trainers in Herzliya for the last year and a half.
You were teaching the instructors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's it like living? You live in Tel Aviv. You have been since, I don't know, 10 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like living there in terms of the beach? Obviously we live in a Jewish state, the spiritual aspects of living there.
Mm-hmm.
And Tel Aviv is a huge secular, party scene also. So where do you fit into all that? Or what's your experience there?
I love Tel Aviv. I think Tel Aviv is a beautiful melting pot of Jewish and non-Jewish people. And I think it can bring the best out of people. My first 5 years in Tel Aviv, my focus was in the city. My focus was Dizengoff, Rothschild, Ben Yehuda, Allenby, these places, where you socialize and meet people. The last 5 years, my whole focus has been the opposite, has been into the nature, into the wild, into the beach that is beyond
Beyond the city.
beyond the city. And I kind of turn the other way when I really need to, when I go home or when I, maybe go to a social event. But my whole focus has been now in the nature, and that's a completely different part of Tel Aviv. And it's an interesting part of Tel Aviv. You have the 6 a.m., high-tech workers, and there's 6 a.m. they want to surf and they want to catch their waves, or they want to go supping, stand-up paddleboarding before work. And they come to relax and to get out their energy. And then you have, later on in the day, you have 8, 9 o'clock people. Then you have the 10 o'clock people, and each one brings their own different vibe. And then you have the people that are just on the beach all day long, and I'm sure anyone that lives in Tel Aviv can recognize them, even if they haven't spoken to them. There's certain characters that are always there, and they embody a lot of wisdom. They're quite interesting characters. They might not be the normative, and it's interesting to see them when you think of a Sarona high-tech, high-rise building, and then you have a yogic master sitting on the beach. But these people share the same space. Regarding spirituality and secular life in Tel Aviv, for me, getting into nature is a lot about balance. It's a lot about my emotional health, and for me, and physical health, obviously. And for me, that is the core of any spiritual experience I can have. And I've been in the Jewish spiritual world and other spiritualities as well. And I think for me, the thing that I noticed for myself and for a lot of other people is that that center, that core, if it's not strong, then the spirituality can sometimes be too much and too unbalanced.
By center and core, you mean your physical and emotional, mental well-being?
Yes, which for me, I find I get being in nature, being by the sea, being in the sea, training. But the spiritual renaissance that's happening in Tel Aviv is also fascinating. You're having a lot more synagogues and classes, a lot more people coming in from Jerusalem, especially this last year, people coming from abroad, Chutz La'aretz, and they come with their own ideas of what spirituality is. I think Israel by itself, no matter where you live in Israel, it changes your concept of what Jewish religious spiritual experience is. It's hard to say who's more spiritual, somebody that's been here for, 50 years building the land and serving in the army and has saved lives, and somebody that spent, his time in Chutz La'aretz but learned a lot of Torah. So now we're seeing that, I think especially after the war, we're seeing that people realize that there's actually maybe not even one's better than the other, but maybe there's a symbiosis here that one needs the other, or at least I hope that's where we're going.
The one and the other, you mean secular and religious people need each other, basically?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we say secular, I think that's also interesting definition. A lot of people call themselves secular, and then they open up whenever they're in trouble. They open up to Tehillim, okay, or they kiss the mezuzah. So it's not exactly the secular Western secular. It's not the same as a secular person in England or in Germany. It's a different mentality. It's saying I think it's more non-practicing.
Non-practicing Jews.
Yeah, they don't practice the conventional mitzvot, but on the other hand, they are doing yishuv haaretz. They live here, right? And
they're building multi-billion-dollar tech companies or whatever people are doing.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a very crowded beach, so it's not. You can't compare it to, someplace in Greece or some exotic island that someone goes to just to enjoy the beach. People are here for different reasons in general, unless maybe they're coming like from Europe and actually just want a warm beach. But I think there's nicer places to go than the Tel Aviv beach, less crowded places. So there is a unique reason that people come here for sure. Have you ever feared for your life while you were in the water?
There's a few times. It just occurred to me now that whenever I'm doing a rescue, which I've done quite a few, you do fear for your life. I mean, your focus is on the other person, but when you're doing a rescue, the other person can flip the board, they can pull you under. We learn a lot of techniques to deal with this, but you're always in that state of, helping them and helping yourself. With surfing, I've had a few very, very massive waves pull me under.
Wow.
I've had one where I remember being under the water and not knowing which way was up. And I was being kind of pummeled by this wave. Like, you have the space between the wave is one of the most important factors of surfing. So you want to have about 10 seconds in between each wave so that you can get into the right position. Anything less than that is hard to surf. People do 8 seconds, 6, yeah. So this was something ridiculous, like 2 or 3, which meant that like by the time you've come up from being pummeled underneath,
another one is coming.
Yeah, another one's falling right in your head. So I remember coming up, and you come up and you take a breath and you kind of keep calm, try and stay underneath. But I remember one time in particular, I was remarkably calm, but I had no idea which way was up.
Wow.
So sometimes a good trick is you pull on your leash. Your leash is connected to your board, and the assumption is your board is above you because it floats.
You would hope, yeah.
You would hope. And in this case, I remember pulling on it and being like, no, this isn't right. The board is underneath me or something like that.
Wow. And
I was going much, much deeper. And one time I just pulled myself back up through the leash. I remember that quite clearly. And another time I had to really let go. They say meet God. You'll come up eventually.
Because if you're fighting it, you could exhaust yourself.
Yeah, and also I didn't know which way was up.
Right.
So what am I going to do?
Where to go.
You're better off. Yeah, exactly. I felt like I was upside down. If I was swimming, I'd be swimming against the current, and I couldn't really tell. I'd be swimming towards the deeper, and I couldn't quite tell what was going on with those waves. It was pushing me in deeper, so I kind of had to let go. And you kind of come to terms with both options there, whatever they might be. And obviously I survived that, yeah. But another 2 incidents happened when I was swimming. I'll just tell you about one of them. Once I was caught in a current. I was caught in a current, what they call a rip current, okay, which takes you out to sea. Mm-hmm. And it was right by the corner by the marina where it's very, very deep. So it was a big current. Although I wasn't so far from shore, it was pulling me out. And I was already on the tail end of the swim, quite exhausted. And I remember swimming against it, and I realized that that's not what you're supposed to do. When there's a rip current, you're supposed to go to the side, get out of the rip. Mm-hmm. But at that moment, I couldn't quite go anywhere. And to my side was actually the rocks. And I was more concerned about being pulled into the rocks. So I had to basically dive under and find a non-current, a non-rip part of the water, part of the sea, and swim out of it. But there, I was swimming for my life for sure. That's one. The other one is the complete opposite. This one was hysterical because it was the calmest day. I don't think I've seen a calmer day than that in my life. It was like a sharav day where there was no wind. It was
sharav is like the extreme heat day.
Extreme heat, yeah. Exactly. Like desert, heat, right? And I remember everything was like orange and beautiful and pink, and the water, it looked like a pond. It looked like so still, like glass. It looked like glass, like, you know, swimming through glass. I was like, this is going to be easy. No winds, no nothing. And I'd gone all the way from Mitzitzim, which is in the north, to somewhere near Jaffa, really one of the last beaches on Jaffa. And I just had battery empty, drained, like this, just like when your phone shuts down. I had
Yeah.
it physically. I just was like,
Your body shut down.
body shut down. And I was in the middle of the water, nowhere.
Wow.
And when there's currents, at least you can use them for to help you, to get you somewhere.
There weren't any currents.
No currents, nothing. And I was stuck there. And then I would get on my back. I did have my floaty device.
Okay.
I don't use it so often anymore, but I used to use it a lot. And I was holding onto this floaty device, and I was like, how am I going to get back? Kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. I tried to kill some time in the water. And I don't actually, to this day, even know how I got back. I can't remember. But what I do remember is I used to have in my in that floaty like a RAV card, like my bus pass, and a credit card, just in case, because I was going quite far, like just in case.
If you catch a bus, yeah.
Exactly, catch a bus home. So I was already in Jaffa, I live in North Tel Aviv. So I remember walking in my wetsuit, like with all my equipment, straight into Aroma and ordering like a coffee and like a sandwich, and just sitting there like thinking about, the meaning of life.
What a scene.
Yeah. And everyone's like looking at me like, what are you doing? Yeah.
Amazing, man. You definitely have a cool job. I can't say I'm not jealous. Although I personally don't like swimming. I like looking at the beach.
Come for a lesson.
Yeah. I mean, is your focus on people who want to start surfing or who are already very advanced surfing, or?
So with the surfing, I mainly teach.
Or swimming.
Yeah, I'll go through both. Surfing, I mainly teach people who, like myself, never thought they would be able to surf. I think a friend of mine summed it up quite well. Surf 101, surfing 101. At the beginning, the real basics, which not many people know. And I take them to about intermediate, upper beginners to intermediate. And from there, I try and send them other places. Most people want to stay with me, like, thank God. But that's really the focus. And I had to learn it. I'm an autodidact. So I had to learn it through breaking up into tiny pieces. And I think that really helps people who either took a surf lesson or they took a class lesson and they just felt like they were being thrown onto the board, or the instructor who might be much younger than them is just like, just jump, just go for it, which is kind of the experience I had as well. So I was lucky enough to learn it a bit older, which meant that I had to like break it down into tiny, tiny pieces. And those pieces I feed people through each session. So every lesson you get something, right? It's not just like yes surf, no surf. It's not binary with me. It's
systematic.
Systematic, and you'll get a skill, right? Even from the first lesson, people are catching waves in one shape or another. It might not be the classic thing that you'll see on YouTube, but it's something. And with the swimmers, I take swimmers from all levels. I've had swimmers who couldn't swim or had a phobia of water. I've had a few of those people working like in a kind of a exposure therapy kind of way, getting them into water and feeling a lot more secure. And then I've had athletes who want to do a triathlon, for example, or learn how to swim long distances. One of my earliest clients couldn't swim like 60 meters, couldn't swim to the breakers, which is maybe it's 150 meters. He couldn't swim there. And then by the end of his time with me, he was swimming 6 breakers down.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's like
6x performance and improvement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you also tackle like nutrition and lifestyle stuff outside of the water, kind of.
If it's relevant, if the student or the client wants to talk about that, we can. I do meal plans, mainly plant-based for the nutrition. I'm not completely vegan, although I think it's very admirable. I haven't eaten meat for a very long time, and if I do, it's really occasionally, and I mean like once a year, if that. Wow. But it's, for me, also a lot of it is, and this part I can't escape, this part has to be part of it, is the presence, the embodiment of the experience. I've had clients come and they are so busy kind of in their mind. Everyone comes, wherever they go, a man walks in with his whole life on his back.
Hmm.
But sometimes, you can hear it. It's rattling around the forefront, and sometimes it's on silent, it's muted.
Hmm.
So it's difficult for me, I won't take somebody in the sea if they're in that headspace.
Oh, you won't take them. Wow.
I won't take them. I mean, we have to do a bit of meditation before or warm up, or we have to talk about it. Like sometimes people think, why is he asking me this? Where's he going? I'm going there because you can't, the sea is it's a beautiful thing, but
You respect it.
you got to respect that she's cruel, which she can be. You got to really go in there, awake and respectful. So I try and get people out of that place, like leave the land on the land. I even tell people, whatever it is, just put it right here. When we're done with the swim, we're going to come back and pick it up.
Hmm.
And that resonated even more when in the surfing, because in the surfing, if you're thinking about even if you're thinking about how you did on the previous wave, you've missed it, you've lost it.
You have to be completely in the moment.
You have to be. And if you're not, the sea will quickly get you there. The sea will get you there. It's going to throw you around and throw you around until you can get out of that headspace and be completely present.
We were talking about earlier that the waves they can knock you down or you can ride them, how that's kind of an analogy for life. And then you said something about the 12-step program where they say, please grant me the strength to change the things that I can,
Mm-hmm.
the serenity to accept things I cannot change and shouldn't, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that you think about regularly while you're surfing? Or if you're living in the moment while you're surfing, you can't have thoughts like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the actual spiritual practice of surfing? Is it just being in the moment?
I think it can be meditative because you have to be embodied. You have to be it's very hard to be up here thinking, even if you're thinking about the waves in a way that's not in tune with the next wave that's coming, you'll miss it. Okay. So sometimes I analyze the waves with the clients, and sometimes it's like, no, save it for later. We're going to be in this wave right now. We're going to be in this moment. You got to also relax. A lot of surfing is also intuitive. Like you can't really look where you're doing. Like you can't really look where you're standing on the board. You have to feel that, and you can't really look where the board is in the wave. You have to kind of feel that and move with that. So you have to be completely embodied in that place. The breathing's important to get to that place of calmness. It's a big high, the big adrenaline rush, right, to catch the wave.
Yeah.
Now, if you're smart, you use that high to paddle back out to the break, to where the wave is. But then you have to zen in again. You have to be a bit
It will
zen.
humble you.
Yeah. Now, the Serenity Pro I like because when I started surfing, I had to do almost like I had to dissect the whole experience because it was too confusing. It was like a big chulun. And I think a lot of people that try doing surfing, it's like this. It's like the waves crashing and the pop-up and everything is just too much. So the shita, the technique that I figured out, the pediological technique that I figured out was basically, how do I isolate these factors? Because there's two things here. There's the waves, which I can't control. I can only recognize, and that's its own skill. And then there's me, the body, the pop-up. Now that thing I can work with, right? And I can work with that even when there's not waves. If I perfect my ability to pop up, then when the wave comes, I've got 60% more chance of actually catching the wave.
Wow.
But if I don't have control over what the technique or what my body's going to do, and I have no control over the wave, it's almost like a gamble. You might catch a wave and you might stand up, but maybe the wave's doing most of the work there.
Wow.
So that's what I really had to separate. They overlap, but I had to separate them. So the training that I do is very much about technique, focusing on what you can do, adapting the pop-up to your own kinesiology. And then we put that, once we've isolated that data, then we put that in the data of the different types of waves, and then we adjust it.
Wow. That's a really deep lesson, not just for surfing, but for life, is that you can't always change the external factors, the waves, but you can always change your internal, your body, or how you process those things, and interact with them. You can change, but you can't change the actual external factors.
Right. I'm trying my best to integrate that into my life, and the surfing has really helped. But exactly as you said, you can prepare for life, but if you're not prepared and life hits you, it's harder.
Prepare for the times where you feel like you're not prepared
Right.
Amazing. And do you think if someone wants to like improve their, interpersonal skills or their psychological or emotional well-being, but don't necessarily have a connection with the ocean and surfing, would they come to you for that? Or do you have a disclaimer that you're not a psychologist?
Um, I definitely have a disclaimer. I did study psychotherapy.
Oh, okay. There
Um,
you go.
I have a postgraduate diploma in psychotherapy. I also am what they call a facilitator of the Byron Katie the work, okay, which is about dealing with limiting beliefs. And I use a lot of that within my training. Uh, in the same way that I didn't quite believe that I could do it, I had to work through that. What are the beliefs that are stopping me? For me, being somebody that lived in Tel Aviv, and I was very concerned that people were going to see me surfing and be like, or see me trying to surf. It was a big one for me.
That they would laugh at you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember it was the summer where I first caught a wave. It was actually Erev Tisha B'Av, and I caught a most beautiful, stunning wave. And I remember catching that and thinking to myself, wow, this is stunning. This is beautiful. But how many hundreds I didn't catch before that?
Because you were scared.
No, not because I was scared, but because I was trying and trying and trying, and it wasn't working. I had to, figure it out. But when I finally caught it, it was like, I don't care how it looks. It feels amazing.
Mm-hmm. All the ones where you fell were worth it.
Totally. Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, I work with limiting beliefs. I'm a big believer in that. Could somebody come to me and just work on limiting beliefs? We could do a page from the work for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to do that.
So you could work with people even if they don't want to go near the water on these ideas or concepts.
Yeah, I have done, and I'd love to again. Yeah.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. How can people find you? How can they get in touch with you?
So I'm using Instagram as kind of a landing page. Alex Open Water. Open water is basically sea swimming in any open natural environment. And there you can see some of the things I'm doing. Also WhatsApp, my phone, that's the easiest way.
And Facebook?
My Facebook, yeah.
What's your Facebook? Alex Open Water?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming on this podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really a great conversation. And hopefully you could come back on sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Amen. B'hatzlacha. It was great.
Now we're going to go explore Pardes Chana since this is your first time here.
Yalla, let's do it.
Yalla.
Nice. Cheers.
Cheers.